You are too, and I need you very quickly to describe your new organization because we really do have sort of a dysfunction now. Conservatives have been so happy as the year started out, and we held the House, the Senate, and the White House, we thought. But we haven't been able to do some of the big things that were promised, like repealing Obamacare. So we need a way to make some of these things happen, don't we?
We sure do. And what I've seen over the years is you can help elect good people. But once they get there, there's no support system for conservatives in the House or the Senate or for their staff. What I've done with the Conservative Partnership Institute is taken the best conservative staff leaders that I ever had in the House and the Senate and formed an organization to be that support team, to train staff, to help place staff, and to convene staff and members to help them develop a consensus. Because that was one of the problems with health care is conservatives had a lot of different ideas on exactly how to repeal and replace, and our message got confused. So just by convening and developing a consensus, I think we can be a lot more effective and constructive. We still need to fight to elect good people, and there's some things, as you know, I'm doing out with the states that I think are important long-term to turn our country around. But right now, this Conservative Partnership Institute is something I hope a lot of your listeners will get engaged with.
Well, let me mention that we do have a link to the website for Conservative Partnership Institute so folks can look at it. It is a new effort, but Senator DeMint, you've already begun work, haven't you?
Yes, we actually started a couple of months ago, and we actually convened a lot of staff and members about this health care bill. We got the conservatives on the same page. Penna, we weren't going to get the repeal that we wanted, but we wanted to keep the process moving in hopes that we could get something like the Cruz Amendment that would help save a private free market health insurance system. And it turned out that the conservatives did keep the bill going, but it was the moderates, what I call the liberals, who stepped up to kill it in the Senate, which is very unfortunate. But it was a good demonstration for me that with a little work in consensus building, that we can be a lot more effective as conservatives.
Senator DeMint, thanks so much for being on the program today and for your long career of advocating for conservative values, even when it was unpopular and probably before it was even popular. We appreciate your long-standing commitment to that and into the future. The left is known for standing all together and kind of as a block vote. Do you sense that the tide is turning when it comes to conservatives who have been in more recent years fractured in their approach?
Well, it's not turning as much as I'd hope. I mean, we still have that element of Rockefeller Republicans in the Republican Party, and actually there are more conservatives, but one of the problems is that support system. It's really punishing to be a conservative in the House or the Senate, and for staff. If you really stand up as a conservative, they're going to try to keep you off committees or dry up your fundraising, or make it hard for you to get reelected back home. And some of the big groups like the U.S. Chamber now are going in and spending lots of money to primary conservatives. So we have to do better as conservatives on the outside and the inside to support these guys. I think there's a growing consensus that our country's in trouble and that we have to do a lot more as fiscal and social conservatives to save our country. And that's a role that we want to play, Jeremy. I can't say that the Republicans are coming together. It seems that they're a little tone deaf at the leadership levels. But I think they should have seen from this last health care debacle that conservatives are willing to work with them, but it's really the moderates who don't care about the party and are willing to let it fall flat.
And I think you're exactly right on that analysis, Senator. And what does that portend for the next couple issues that are on the docket now, for tax reform, for immigration reform, for judicial nominations?
Well, we're making a little progress on judicial nominations. The Senate was able to move a few through, and I know I helped get them a good list, not just for the Supreme Court, but for all of the lower court levels at the district circuit level. And so I think we can make some progress there, but the Democrats are making it very, very hard to move these nominees in block, which is normally what the minority party will do. On tax reform, Jeremy, I'm somewhat optimistic that the Republicans, particularly in the House, see that they can't do all the reforms that we wanted. We just don't have the right players on the field, as Newt Gingrich is saying. We just need to get the rates down and get it down in a hurry so that the economy can come back and Americans can see that our ideas are actually better than what they've gotten from Obama and the left. So that's what we're working on right now, is lowering our expectations, but not giving up on our principles. We need to get the rates down, and if we have a good midterm elections, I think we'll be able to go back and do more to simplify the code and reform it in a way that a lot of us would like to.
Senator, we only have about a minute before the break, and I guess we have to let you go. But I think you have a needle to thread, because you've got really leadership, as you said. They have to be persuaded sometimes. You're battling them, and yet you need to be friendly with them. And then you have the Trump administration. So it's going to be a rough job, isn't it?
It is, but one way we can help leadership is present them with a block of votes who have a consensus on an issue. It doesn't help conservatives and doesn't help the Republican leadership if conservatives have 10 different ideas on tax reform.
Right.
The only way we can advance our agenda is for all the conservatives to come together and agree on what is possible on our side of the ledger. That what they've called compromise in the past has basically been on the Democrat side. But we can move the ball in the right direction if conservatives will come together and we take that block of votes to the Republican leadership.
Well, Senator, I am so glad you're quarterbacking this, and we're grateful that you joined us today to alert us. I hope that you will keep us in mind as things move forward. Anytime you want to get a message out to our listeners, we would love to have you on.
Well, thank you, Penna. And as you know, I'm working on two fronts right now. I'm going to keep swinging in Washington, and I'm working with Tom Coburn on the Article 5 Convention of States, because I know Washington will never stop spending. So we've got to have a short and a long game, and hopefully states will come together like Texas did last year, or this year actually, and to help us move the ball in the right direction on that front.
Well, Senator, thank you so much for joining us. Best of everything, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Penna and Jeremy.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back with more of Point of View.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
What if Christians and Christian institutions that provide so many social services went on strike? That is a question that Addison Del Mastro asked in The American Conservative. He reminds us of the book by Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged. She proposes the question of what would happen if entrepreneurs in America decided to go on strike because of an increasingly overbearing regulatory state. The book documents the dystopia the country falls into. While I doubt that Christians and Christian groups will ever go on strike, it is a great thought experiment. Addison De Mastro explains that many of the services Americans take for granted are provided by churches and Christian organizations. One example is healthcare. John Stonestreet, in his Breakpoint commentary, wrote, "No Christianity, no hospitals. Don't take Christian contributions for granted." Catholic, Baptist, and Methodist hospitals can be found all over the country. He documented that in at least 30 communities, the Catholic hospital is the only hospital within a 35-mile radius. Education is another area where Christian involvement has been key. Christians run thousands of private schools that usually meet or exceed the quality of the public schools. The Catholic Church or various Protestant denominations or churches run more than 7 in 10 of the private schools in America. Churches also minister to the needy and marginalized in society. There are soup kitchens and outreaches to the poor and homeless. Churches also provide meals for the homebound. They provide marriage counseling as well as psychological counseling. Christian organizations place children in foster care and adoption, and Christian groups run pregnancy resource centers. You know, Christians aren't going on strike, but if they did, America would be a very different place indeed. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter. This is our weekend edition, and Jeremy Dyes is in studio with me. Jeremy is Deputy General Counsel at First Liberty Institute. And Jeremy, it's good to have you, first of all. We have so much going on. I was trying to list things we'd talk about today, and I had to leave a lot off the list, and we may not even get through the whole list. So we'll see. But the first thing I want to talk about with you is the fact that in recent days you were in Washington, D.C. with some other attorneys from your organization, and you were talking about something very important, and that is the rules from the Affordable Care Act implementing what we've called the HHS mandate, fought it in the Hobby Lobby case for companies, but still there are nonprofits that are who are Christian, Bible believing, who are forced under this mandate. This mandate says that they have to provide contraception free of charge, and even the kind that causes the abortivation type contraception. And it's just amazing to me that that's still in place. It's been to court, it's been back. It was left over from Obama. So you went to talk about that, didn't you?
I did. And, as I told the staff from the various acronyms out there, we had all these 3 and 4 letters out there from HHS, IRS, DOJ, DOL, Department of Labor, IRA, which is the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs.
Never heard of it.
OMB. There's all these different acronyms that are there, and they're all at the meeting. And what I explained to them, I said, hey, look, I've been litigating this issue now going back 4 years. It's been 4 years we've been litigating this issue. First, it was on behalf of for-profit companies, and we represented specifically 2 car dealerships, one in Minnesota, one in West Virginia, both of whom were faith-based, or they were owned by a faith-based person, and they had an objection to providing these abortifacients as a part of their plan. And they couldn't get any relief. They ultimately got relief through the courts here, and that was good. There were still a couple little twists and turns throughout that whole process that nobody really expected. But then we thought that we had that resolved once Hobby Lobby came out. But lo and behold, we didn't have all the nonprofit issues sorted through because the Obama administration changed a couple of the rules and it made it a little bit more difficult. And we're all familiar now with the Little Sisters of the Poor and their plight there. Well, Little Sisters, as well as our cases here, we represent Chuck Swindoll, I'm sorry, Dr. Charles Stanley.
No, it's Chuck Swindoll. Insight for Living.
I feel badly. I need to apologize publicly on there.
We've got 2 famous Charles
I always
teachers.
get them confused. It's terrible. I listened to both growing up, and I get them both confused. So we represent Insight for Living Ministries. That's the easier way of putting that together, along with some ministries associated with the Christian and Missionary Alliance of Domination, and they're throughout the country, colleges, retirement communities, etc. And so we've been representing them since 2013. So it'll be 4 years this coming summer, this coming fall. And we've been litigating this issue as it concerns the contraceptive mandate for nonprofit ministries, people who are motivated by a religious belief to do their ministry for these going on 3 or 4 years now, with no resolution in sight. Now, we've got various levels of status of these cases. Insight for Living has a reasonably good injunction in place here that's helping them get along right now. But our other clients are kind of stuck in between. They've got kind of half a loaf from the court, half of the case is down at a district court, and the other half is up at a circuit court of appeal right below the Supreme Court of the United States.
So they're all separate cases? They're
all separate cases, and there's 2 of them that are going on right now. But the appeals in the 11th Circuit, for instance, where our CMA clients are at, it's been sitting there for years now, literally on stay. And since that case went up to, the Little Sisters case went up to the Supreme Court of the United States, the circuit court said, well, let's just put this case, our case, on hold until the Little Sisters case is settled out. Well, what did the Supreme Court do with the Little Sisters of the Poor case? They basically held arguments and said, look, you guys seem to be pretty close together. There seems to be a way to be able to arrive at a resolution in this matter. Y'all go back and figure it out. And so they sent the Obama administration and the Little Sisters clients back for more discussion. Very little discussion happened. That's about 6 months before the end of President Obama's term. And on the way out the door, President Obama's administration basically says, yeah, we're not going to change anything. And so we ended that administration with the knowledge that nothing had really changed, that these ministries are still required to provide these abortifacients. But there was some hope that the new president coming in, President Trump, would provide some relief here through the regulatory affairs. And several months went by with very little action until we get to May. Mm-hmm. And in May, you'll remember that he provided this executive order on religious liberty. One of the aspects of that was to direct these departments, the IRS, HHS, etc., to provide rules that would provide relief. And you may even remember in the Rose Garden ceremony, he
Yes.
specifically pointed to the Little Sisters of the Poor who were there and saying, this isn't going to happen anymore. We're going to give you the relief you need. Well, that was May.
And nothing's
happened since then. Right now, the only thing that's happened since then is that a leak was given out. Now we understand that this administration seems to be about as leaky as a sieve. But one of the good leaks that came out of this whole deal was a draft rule on this matter, and it's a very good rule. It's a very long rule, but at the very end of the day, if you have a religious belief or moral conviction against providing these abortifacients, you're exempt. Period. So the rule that is drafted, that has been leaked now, that seems to be in someone's computer somewhere within the government, that is just ready to be put out there as an interim final rule, that rule purports to give our clients and everybody who's litigated on this issue exactly what we've asked for from the very beginning. So we went to Washington, D.C. to meet with these agencies specifically to say, here's the whole history, and I outlined it just like I outlined it to you. Here's what this interim draft rule purports to say. That's a good thing, we said, and we urge you to get this out there as soon as possible so that we can just bring a finality to all this litigation that's been going on for years now. The exemptions are so broad, in fact, that not only does it encompass the religious ministries that are out there that have these religious beliefs and moral convictions, but it extends beyond that to for-profit companies, publicly traded companies. It's an excellent rule that should be adopted here. And I can tell you this. We're not the only ones who have met with the White House on this issue. The other side has met with them as well, and they're saying the precise opposite of what we've been saying, that they're saying this is a bad interim rule, don't pass it. But we were one of the very first firms that are litigating this issue to actually meet with the White House and urge them to adopt this interim final rule. So we hope they will.
Do you think that part of the delay has been the possibility of repealing Obamacare?
I think so, and we were there right at the time when the Senate was make or break. It was going to go one way or another. This was just last week, so people remember how much contention there was about that. But given where the Senate has ended up now, I think it's even more important that the White House issue these interim final rules, provide that relief that is necessary there, and make sure that's in place at least until, I guess in the words of President Trump, Obamacare actually fails. And we have to then we're forced to do something else with it all. But in light of the failure by the Senate to take any action on this matter, I think it's even more important that the president make good on his promise that he's made not only in the campaign trail, but also now in the office, to say he's going to provide relief for those who are suffering under the weight. Just think about this. And this was kind of a shock to at least one of the people in the room last week, because they asked me some questions about, whether or not people would take advantage of this, if they offered all this kind of stuff. I said, well, look, it's not your business to tell people what they believe or how to exercise their belief. That's not the role of the government. The role of the government is simply to provide some structure. Our Constitution requires that we recognize that these ministries have a right to be able to abide by their beliefs. It came as something of a shock to at least one or two people in the room that day.
They didn't know that?
It is as if
they
hadn't really
thought about it.
Like it hadn't dawned on them before that was kind of the reality of it all, which is kind of funny to see bureaucrats kind of light up and they're, I hadn't considered basic elements of the Constitution before. But there you go. Where we have people who are actually writing these regulations thinking that they can actually coerce people within the United States to violate their religious convictions. And when we're able to bring to them real stories of real people who are caring for the sick and the elderly, who are caring for the next generation of future leaders on college campuses, who are training people both here and abroad on religious principles like Insight for Living does so well, it becomes a lot more real to them. So I'm glad we had this meeting. I hope more people will take advantage of that. Perhaps you run a religious organization and would like to meet with OIRA.
They'll meet with you, huh?
Go do it. You send an email to Mabel somebody or other at OMB and you can have the meeting. It's a great time for them to say, hey, look, this is an important issue for us to do.
Well, it's nice that conservatives are actually welcome to meet. I wanted to get back to what Senator DeMint said. I guess we'll have to do it after the break, but I thought it was interesting that it took a little coordination to get the conservatives behind the repeal, the skinny repeal of Obamacare. That was done. They all got on board. And I always kind of wondered, well, Rand Paul really voted for this? Ted Cruz? But they did because they wanted to move it forward. The ones that stopped it were the liberal Republicans. So I see some hope with getting some things done here in Congress. And that was a fun interview. But ladies and gentlemen, Let me just open the phones so we can start to talk about Obamacare, getting something done in Washington, D.C. for conservatives. The number is 800-351-1212 if you have questions for Jeremy. We're going to jump in and talk about Obamacare. What's next? What does the left want President Trump to do right now? Will he do it to save Obamacare, or at least keep it going for a while? We will talk about all of that right after this here on Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter in studio with Jeremy Dyes, and we'll be back after these important messages.
Would you like to be above average or exceptional? I'll explain how you can be in a moment. What do you think about change? Some people love it, others not so much. I'm guessing you agree our culture needs change, but how will that happen? Change happens with you and your influence. If each of us does our part, God can change the culture through us. That's a goal at Point of View, to help you change things around you. We never charge for the information we deliver each day, but that information is not free. There is a significant cost in getting it to you. You know who helps us do that? About 1 out of every 800 listeners to Point of View. So you can be above average. You can be exceptional by visiting pointofview.net and clicking the banner Change Happens with You, or by calling 1-800-347-5151. Thank you for being exceptional by supporting Point of View. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
The phones are open, 800-351-1212. Jeremy Dies from First Liberty Institute is in studio with me, and this is your Friday weekend edition. Jeremy, I know your cases are so interesting, and this one, the one about Rodriguez, who was retired from, I think, was it the Air Force?
That's right.
He was retired from the Air Force. He wanted a certain kind of a ceremony, and or actually a friend did, and he was basically making it happen, and he was actually pulled off the stage. Now you are asking for an investigation to get some more information into this. And could you just explain what's going on here?
Sergeant Rodriguez spent his career in the Air Force and served honorably. And I'm sure you've probably seen these flag folding ceremonies where it's very poignant. There's a script that goes with it all. Well, Sergeant Rodriguez had done that and does do that kind of thing. And some guy really was moved by it. And it has this really beautiful script that goes with it, talking about God bless America, God bless this flag, that sort of thing. Well, this airman asked him to perform this at his retirement ceremony, and so Rodriguez came down, did so, or was planning on doing so, and the wing commander there, or the base commander, didn't like the fact that Rodriguez was going to come on his base and say the word God in this ceremony. And so, and you can go to firstliberty.org and find this, but when we say he was removed from the room, we literally mean that when he gets up there to do his speech, these airmen get up in BDUs, in their camouflage, and stand up, get in Rodriguez's face, and effectively tell him, you're not going to do this, and Rodriguez ignores them and goes on to his script, and they grab him by the shoulders and drag him out of the room as he continues to give his speech until you can't hear him anymore when he gets out of the room.
Do you still have the video of that on your website?
Yeah, go to firstliberty.org. You'll be able to find it and watch it. It is incredibly angry. It's blood-boiling,
It is. I've
frankly.
seen it.
But so that we filed a lawsuit on this, and we're working on behalf of on Sergeant Rodriguez to do that. But when that went down, the head of the Air Force there, I was trying to remember the exact title, the Secretary of the Air Force.
Deborah Lee James.
That's right. She ordered the Secretary, the Air Force Inspector General, to conduct an investigation into this incident. And they actually conducted, as we understand it, two different investigations. One on the First Amendment issue, whether or not his First Amendment rights were violated in this process, which we allege they were. And then another one on his Fourth Amendment violations here, whether he was given due process, whether all that, whether he was wrongly convicted, and all this kind of stuff. We know the results of at least one of those. They've only released the First Amendment investigation. They've never released that Fourth Amendment investigation. And we're really curious to find out, what's the Air Force hiding here? I mean, you have here a veteran of many years in the United States Air Force who has been assaulted by by uniformed members of the Air Force. Now the Air Force is stalling and withholding information. Clearly, they're hiding something. I mean, the federal law requires the government to make a determination within 20 days of a FOIA request, yet it's been 200 days, and we still haven't had anything but delays from them. So we've asked them for stuff, but they haven't given us anything. So we've actually had to file a lawsuit saying they are violating the Freedom of Information Act by withholding this information. Whatever they're hiding, it must be really, really bad for the United States Air Force.
What are you seeking for Sergeant Rodriguez?
Well, at least an apology. I mean, for goodness sakes, here is a man who served honorably in his country. He retired from the United States Air Force a number of years ago. He is now a civilian. And so he came on the base there to provide this ceremony for this retiring airman, and as a civilian was hauled out of the room by uniformed members of the United States Air Force. That is not what the United States Air Force is all about. And what this lawsuit is going to ultimately do, I believe, is remind the people in the United States Air Force and the military in general that they still have, as service members, they have religious liberty here. And especially people who are over top of them, they need to remember that there could be a liability that attaches to them for violating the First or Fourth Amendment rights of the citizens on their base. And that's exactly what this commander did.
Wow. So, and yeah, it would just sort of set some sort of a precedent for religious liberty. The Air Force seems to be, of all the branches of the military, it seems like I see the most religious liberty violations in the Air Force.
Yeah, the veterans in our office who are of the United States Marine Corps and Army and Navy seem to remind us of that quite often. Or at least we have one veteran of the United States Air Force as well, and the interagency squabbles about that are fun at times. But you're right, we've had a number of these issues, whether that's Sergeant Monk, who is threatened with being kicked out for his position on a certain issue religiously, or others. Of course, we've had the United States Navy as well, and Chaplain Motter, and a number of others there. But it shouldn't be the case. When they're defending our freedom here and abroad, we got to do everything we can to provide their freedom and make sure that it's protected to have their religious liberty while in arms.
We said we'd take your calls, so let's go to the phones. Again, the number is 800-351-1212. Jimmy is in Texas, listening in on KBJS. Hi, Jimmy. Thanks for calling.
Hi. Hannah, I've got a question. Herbie, the first part of the week, was talking about how congressmen and senators are kind of exempt from Obamacare because the Office of Personnel Management made a decree where they could be treated as small businesses of under 50 employees.
Right.
Isn't there some way that Trump could, by presidential order, rescind that order where Congress would have to live under Obamacare like the rest of the public?
I think there is, because I think he's threatening to do just that. I've heard him say that as late as this week.
That might motivate them to start doing something to correct it if they had to live under it.
Yeah, I think so. I think what it is they're under Obamacare, but they have, because of they're like an employer, and so employers can have certain statuses.
Yeah, and I don't remember exactly how it all works out, but the threat would not have been made if that's not a thing that could be both motivational as well as legal. So I suspect that there is a mechanism that the administration has up their sleeve if they'd like to be able to employ it. Maybe they'll have to do that. I mean, goodness sakes, we send senators and congressmen there in not only this last election, but the several ones previous to that, to do this very thing, to get rid of this monstrosity called Obamacare. And yet they continue to raise money off of you and me to run back for office with all these promises that it's going to go away, and yet it's still there.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your call, Jimmy. I appreciate it, and it's a very good part of this, I think, debate right now. I would like to see them continue working on Obamacare. I've heard from some sources that it is actually continuing behind the scenes, but others are saying, well, we're just going to move on. Thanks for your call. I want to send you to pointofview.net, especially during this next break. You could take a look. I put an article up there from the Wall Street Journal called The Coming Obamacare Bailout. And Senator McCain, when he kind of blew up the last vote on the skinny repeal, he said that he really can't abide doing something this drastic like repealing Obamacare just with one party. He wants to see it done in a bipartisan way. And, to me, that's impossible because I don't think any Democrat would vote for anything that would change Obamacare. The only thing they will vote for is described in this article, The Coming Obamacare Bailout. And that's basically a bailout for the insurance companies. And, you can read a little bit about it and we'll continue to discuss it here on the program. But, Jeremy, that's the next decision that President Trump has to make. There have been payments going to the insurance companies. Not for subsidies, but to help them because they're forced to cover pre-existing conditions. It's very expensive for them to do it. So to keep the insurance companies involved, they have been getting these payments every quarter. But it's really, the Congress has voted that they shouldn't be getting them. And the Congress has taken this to court, and the court said they shouldn't be getting them, but Obama kept sending them. Trump has continued to send them also. He's being asked not to send the next one, though.
Yeah, and the article makes clear here that at some point this is going to catch up with you because you can't just continue to throw money at things that are failing without it having to do something. We remember in recent years the bailout of the financial industry and what that has been, and frankly the controversy that has come through a lot of those things. Well, look, if Obamacare is going to fail, and every analysis that's out there seems to fairly indicate that it will at some point fail without a massive infusion of cash, there's going to be a need for some form of bailout to be done in all this, whether that is, you call that an actual physical financial bailout or merely a political bailout. Something's going to have to be done. It is better to just simply scrap it from the beginning and move on to something that is better to go forward with on a better choice. But if you're going to continue to provide these subsidies, we're going to continue to run out of money to be able to provide them because they're going to continue to fail, and we're not going to be able to provide enough funds for them.
You know, I guess part of the dilemma is if insurance companies fail, the left will come in and say, well, see, we needed single payer. And so it will be an argument for full-on socialized medicine in America.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. And I think what you're seeing here and what I think Senator DeMint was pointing to very clearly is, look, the left is really good about staying united on one issue, and they don't actually even grab for the whole pie on the table. They just want a crumb or two to get their foot in that door. The right, not so much.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we will continue taking your calls in the next segment, 800-351-1212. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
The sad news of the death of 11-month-old Charlie Gard sparked something in my memory. Charlie Gard is the British baby who died last week after an unsuccessful, months-long battle his parents fought with the British Health Service to take him to the U.S. for treatment. I rifled through some old posters and found what I was looking for, a poster that contains a picture of my husband and me in straitjackets, blindfolded, with our mouths taped shut. This was a mock-up for a promotional piece Concerned Women for America sent out to its members, encouraging them to call their U.S. senators. The copy explains that a treaty about to come before the Senate for ratification would give government officials authority over children, over and above their parents. The copy contains a warning against ratifying the treaty, stating, America must not make the same mistake as Great Britain. The treaty is the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. Then President Bill Clinton signed it, and 195 countries eventually ratified it. But pressure from pro-family and parents' rights groups caused the U.S. Senate to withhold approval, and to this day, to its credit, the Senate has not taken this up. William Estrada, an attorney and director of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, wrote in the Daily Signal that, quote, this convention diminishes the role of parents in the care of their own children and leaves them at the mercy of the state. This is exactly what happened to Charlie Gard. Charlie's parents raised $1.7 million to seek the only treatment that might have helped. But during the months in which Charlie's parents appealed his case, all the way to the European Court of Human Rights, the disease acted on his muscles and organs, weakening them beyond hope. The court's final decision cited Article 3 of the Convention, which places the state in charge of children and only requires it to take the parents' rights into account. Bitter fruit of an evil treaty. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I am Penna Dexter. Jeremy Dyes is also in studio with me. And let me just lay a question on the table. We've explained to you in the last segment, we also have an article at pointofview.net about these bailouts for insurance companies that President Trump has to decide if he's going to do the next one. There is a lawsuit by Congress. It was done during the Obama administration, and it's been appealed. I guess the final appeal has actually not been decided. But, you know, Congress said these subsidies should not be made. They've never been appropriated. And what Obama did was take it out of the Treasury and go ahead and pay the subsidies under the Affordable Care Act to insurance companies. They need the subsidies, they say, because the Affordable Care Act forces them to cover pre-existing conditions, and they can't charge the people anymore for those policies, and it's very expensive to do that. I don't even think that's insurance when you're forced to cover pre-existing conditions. It's more like welfare. But so there's this sort of a stalemate in a sense. President Obama and then in the early quarters of President Trump's administration have continued to send the bailout monies to the insurance companies. If they don't get them, they will be forced to raise premiums or pull out. So, you can see the dilemma there. And the question is, should Trump do it this time? Should he call their bluff, not send the money, and see what happens and see if Congress comes back to the table to repeal and replace Obamacare? Or should he go ahead and send them again this time? That's a question. If you have an opinion on that, you can call us at 800-351-1212. Jeremy, what do you think?
Boy, I don't know. The guy who's supposedly the great deal maker here may have that on his table and may be trying to figure out, okay, is this how we keep their feet to the fire? Because what it does is it puts at the point of decision those in the more moderate middle, and I'm thinking of Murkowski and Collins and John McCain, those who are going to have to figure out, okay, do I side with the left and therefore reveal more of my own leftward leaning tilt? Or do I swallow a bitter pill and have to side with the right on a few things? What we do know in both of those decisions is that the left is going to stay where they're at, to go where they, I think, want to go. The article you posted on pointofview.net today, I always like to point out really good writing, and this author, I think, hits it very well. And they say, Mr. Schumer is mumbling sweet nothings about, quote, bipartisanship, but his definition of that word is GOP surrender. Bail out insurers, impose price controls on big pharma, and that's about it. That's not much of a negotiation tactic. They seem to be starting from a position of somewhat strength here to say we've got all the cards because we've got the status quo. And without the status quo on your side, it's hard to fight up against that battle because once you've created a new entitlement, those entitlements are really hard to pull back. Can you name a couple entitlements? If you can name more than 5 that have happened that have been removed in the past 50 years, I'd be shocked.
That's why I've been very skeptical that they could actually repeal Obamacare and replace it with anything that was sufficiently free market for our liking. But, I think that we have to do the best we can. We really do. And there's another issue. Speaking of battles, of course, there's a big battle against President Trump's legitimacy in even winning the election. And so there's been all these investigations into Russian collusion into the election. And now we have this independent prosecutor named Robert Mueller, special counsel. And yesterday, the news broke that he is actually now has a grand jury in Washington, which means that this is a real effort here. There's going to be lots of testimony. There'll probably be indictments, and it means that this is serious business. And it also, in a sense, takes President Trump's threat to fire Robert Mueller, maybe not totally off the table, but makes it pretty stupid for him to do so, correct?
Yeah, look, it's really hard to fire someone whose title is independent or special, right? It's very difficult to find a way to say, well, that person is really, fox in the hen house or something like that we need to get rid of. And when you add to that, the latest revelation is that they're convening a grand jury who, the famous lines about grand juries are, they could indict a ham sandwich. And it's probably true because their threshold is pretty low to be able to provide that indictment to come out with. And so what the special prosecutors here are trying to do is to provide a bit of cover for their own efforts here by saying, hey, look, we didn't come up with this. We didn't indict you. Grand jury did. We provided them investigative materials. And they said that was sufficient for an entitlement, and our great tradition in our country is that we utilize such things. But that is a good way of providing political cover. I don't know at the end of the day where this special investigation goes. The history would suggest that they don't go in a very good way for sitting presidents, but we'll see where it ultimately ends up.
In a sense, they're trying to find the crime. The crime has not actually been delineated. And so, it's just speculated. And, it seems to me that President Trump's, I think, red line, and this was mentioned by Charles Krauthammer in a piece we put at pointofview.net, is, they're going to look into the Russian activities, but if they start looking into his businesses and digging through his own personal businesses, which we're getting signs that that's what they're
just think if that was you, if that was your business at home, if you're listening, just imagine as your company that, they're looking at other things, but all of a sudden they say, oh, well, what about this little line item over here? Did you forget to cross that T? Well, that's actually a felony in and of itself. And all of a sudden, the thing that was, off on stage right that they were actually pursuing is now front and center saying, oh, this is now the crime that we're going to go after. What's the old adage? It's not the crime, it's the cover-up that gets you killed. And that seems to be, if that's where this special prosecutor is going towards, even those with the squeakiest, cleanest record that you can have, I think would always be nervous that someone with a 3-letter acronym in front of their agency is going to be able to find some way to be able to hang something on you.
This is what Charles Krauthammer said on Fox last night. He said that, look, the problem with special prosecutors is you assemble a team of the best in search of a crime. And that it kind of seems like that's what they're doing. So this is to dog the president and also probably to make it very, very difficult for him to stop it, nip it in the bud. So that's going to be something that he's always going to have to contend with, at least until it's over. Now, Ty Cobb, who's the attorney, special counsel for the White House, he tried to make sort of lemonade out of it, saying, well, this means they're actually wrapping it up. I doubt it.
No, I don't think so. I think it seems to be just getting going.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, in the next hour, starting off at the top of the next hour, we're going to bring in another guest, and he's somebody who's familiar to listeners of Point of View, Jonathan Saenz from Texas Values. And the reason we're going to be talking about a Texas issue is because it's really a national issue. This took place in the state of North Carolina. There was a huge battle over privacy in bathrooms and the transgender issue. And we are now in the state of Texas fighting that same issue. And there's been a special session called for the Texas legislature for several issues, but this is the most high-profile one. There was a big rally in Austin yesterday of pastors trying to get some common sense into our laws here in Texas and to protect women because of this whole idea that people can go into any bathroom based on what gender they think they are and not what gender they biologically are. And so, I mean, to me, it's just absolutely head-scratching and amazing that we are battling over something like this. There's a deeper agenda, but right now we're just talking about privacy and trying to get lawmakers to protect the privacy of people, make things safe for people across Texas, and also protect the rights of businesses and other entities. So we're going to talk with Jonathan Saenz about that. I want to send you to pointofview.net. You can find all the information, articles about the issues we're discussing here. You can link to First Liberty Institute, which is a great website. You can learn about their cases and see the video of Sergeant Rodriguez being taken off the stage. I recommend you go and find that. And you can also take advantage of the donate button to help Point of View broadcast the program every single day. We are a listener-supported ministry. We depend on you to help us. And if you've never given, it's a great opportunity for you to team up with us. So please do that during the break, and we'll see you after this.
Would you like to be above average or exceptional? I'll explain how you can be in a moment. What do you think about change? Some people love it, others not so much. I'm guessing you agree our culture needs change. But how will that happen? Change happens with you and your influence. If each of us does our part, God can change the culture through us. That's a goal at Point of View, to help you change things around you. We never charge for the information we deliver each day, but that information is not free. There is a significant cost in getting it to you. You know who helps us do that? About 1 out of every 800 listeners to Point of View. So you can be above average. You can be exceptional by visiting pointofview.net and clicking the banner Change Happens with You, or by calling 1-800-347-5151. Thank you for being exceptional by supporting Point of View. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kirby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Welcome back to Point of View. We're so glad you're sticking with us for the second hour. Jeremy Dyes from First Liberty Institute is with me in studio, and this is your Friday weekend edition. And, this is big news from Texas, but it really affects the whole nation. Last week, the Texas State Senate passed the bill that I discussed in the last hour, which prevents public schools and government buildings from adopting policies that would open women's showers, bathrooms, and changing facilities to men and vice versa. It also prevents political subdivisions from forcing businesses and organizations, including contractors, to open their showers, locker rooms, and bathrooms to people of the opposite sex. Of course, this has been known as the transgender bathroom bill. The Texas Senate tried to pass this during the regular session. They overwhelmingly passed protections for women, but it never was voted on in the Texas House. There's been a special session called, and with us to discuss this is Jonathan Saenz. He is the president of Texas Values, which is a nonprofit group dedicated to preserving and advancing a culture of family values in the state of Texas. He has strong ties with First Liberty Institute. He used to run their office there in Austin. And Jonathan, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, it's great to be with you, Penna. Thanks for having me on.
It's amazing that we are still here, that we even had to have a special session for the privacy bill, which had so much publicity even before even last year, as we're in the run-up to the regular session. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, Texas legislature only meets every other year, and for like 5 months. And so, but you can't always get everything done, especially when you have people running the House who want to block things at every turn, correct?
Well, that's exactly what we're facing. You know, the Texas Privacy Act, the Senate version of Senate Bill 3, it was passed by bipartisan support in the Texas Senate. So you even had a Democrat that supported this. But in the House, you've got a Republican Speaker, Joe Strauss, and the chair of the House State Affairs Committee, Republican Byron Cook, who are blocking this common sense legislation. We had a teletown hall the other night, had over 4,000 people on our telephone teletown hall, and we polled these questions about whether or not people supported state laws that kept men from going into women's bathrooms, and whether or not when they go to the ballot box in the next election cycle that this issue is going to matter to them. And they were all over 90%, as you might imagine. Very strong support for this issue across the state. And so, you know, look, if people want more information, our website's txvalues.org. We've got a whole landing page dedicated to this issue. But the problem is not that the people support it. There's plenty of support across the state for this issue. The problem is some legislators are trying to block the issue, and they're really thwarting the will of other legislators. I mean, a lot of legislators, they want to vote their districts. And the reason this is a statewide law that's being proposed is because local government has made a mess of this issue. Mm-hmm. They made a mess of it in Houston, and they tried to keep the people from voting on it, and that didn't work. People finally got to vote. In 61-39, they voted to keep men out of women's bathrooms. And the reason why is because these local governments keep trying to pass laws that allow men to go into women's bathrooms, that allow boys to go into girls' bathrooms, shower rooms, and locker rooms in public schools. Fort Worth passed a policy that does that. So did Dripping Springs, a school district just outside of Austin. Coppell in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas. There's been a lawsuit in Pennsylvania on this issue. There was a court case that went up to the Supreme Court briefly, U.S. Supreme Court. So there's all these examples of activists and local governments trying to pass new laws or trying to implement other laws that allow people to decide if they want to go into the bathroom that doesn't match up with their biological sex. That puts people in jeopardy, like 10-year-old Shiloh, a little elementary school girl who's been concerned about this issue along with her parents in a Texas school district. What about her rights? What about her privacy? And so the state realizes, look, we can't have this patchwork of laws across the state. 1,200 school districts have to have consistency on this issue, and that's what the Texas Privacy Act is about.
Yeah, and Jonathan, as you well know, some of those school districts have launched these things with little or no notice to the parents whatsoever. They've just simply dropped them in there. But one of the things that I think I remember seeing here recently, I know you guys had some people down there at the Capitol visiting lawmakers, but as I understand it, one of the lawmakers didn't want to meet with y'all and seemed to lock the door. Is that right?
Yes. So yesterday there were faith leaders from across the state and some from the national level that came to the Capitol, and they had an event at the Capitol, and they put out a letter with over 1,000 pastors across the state that signed a letter saying that we need a state law that's consistent to protect privacy in showers, bathrooms, and locker rooms in government buildings and public schools. And over 200 of them there, and they wanted to have a meeting with State House State Affairs Chairman Byron Cook. And when they went up to his door, and I was there with him, the door was locked. I mean, it was clear. You could hear voices on the inside. There were people inside the office, and they refused to open the door and unlock the door, which I don't know that you can do that during business hours at the Capitol, but the door was locked. They wouldn't let people in, and you could hear. We have a video on our Facebook page, on our Texas Values Facebook page, where they're shouting, "Let the House vote." And, they couldn't even get in to meet. They wouldn't even let them in the office to meet with Chairman Byron Cook. And so, but that just gives you an idea of how Byron Cook and his office and some state legislators do things. They will just turn their back on the will of the people and shut them out, lock them out of the process, if you will. But, I think the more that people hear about this, that's not going to go over very well.
Jonathan, the argument that you hear about this in favor of blocking the Privacy Act is that the state is going to lose business because of this. Look at North Carolina. How do you respond to that?
Well, that's just the desperation argument, because really that's the only argument they can make. All the other arguments as well just don't make sense. But North Carolina, first of all, that argument doesn't add up. It's based on fuzzy math. North Carolina is number 2 for business. Tourism is up in every county in their state. Texas, for the 13th straight year, was just ranked the best state for business. And so the numbers just don't add up. These are all hypotheticals and things that people want, their fear tactics that they're using. Now, there were a couple of events that canceled in North Carolina initially, and so there was some temporary impact on them. But if you look at the size of the budget in states like North Carolina and Texas, just because Bruce Springsteen and a couple of other sporting events decide temporarily to move or to go somewhere, that's hardly even scratching the surface or, impacting the budget at all. But even if that was the case, even if there were a couple of people that tried to threaten that, it's not like these businesses are going to go anywhere. What other state they're going to go to other than Texas? They know it's the best state for business. But if people want to put to take that position, Lois Colcourse said it very clear, the author of the Texas Privacy Act. In Texas, we put our daughters before dollars.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to ask you after the break, because I've seen businesses who come up with this argument against common sense protections. And when you ask their leaders what their bathroom policies are the same as we're trying to allow for in our state, where
that's right,
people use the bathroom that they're biologically suited to use. Can you stick with us for another segment, Jonathan?
You bet.
All right,
Absolutely.
ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to speak about this, ask Jonathan a question or make a comment, 800-351-1212 is the number. All right, this is a battle for common sense, privacy, conscience on the part of businesses, all of those things. Texas is at the epicenter right now. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
What if Christians and Christian institutions that provide so many social services went on strike? That is a question that Addison Del Mastro asked in The American Conservative. He reminds us of the book by Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged. She proposes the question of what would happen if entrepreneurs in America decided to go on strike because of an increasingly overbearing regulatory state. The book documents the dystopia the country falls into. While I doubt that Christians and Christian groups will ever go on strike, it is a great thought experiment. Addison De Mastro explains that many of the services Americans take for granted are provided by churches and Christian organizations. One example is healthcare. John Stonestreet in his Breakpoint commentary wrote, "No Christianity, no hospitals. Don't take Christian contributions for granted." Catholic, Baptist, and Methodist hospitals can be found all over the country. He documented that in at least 30 communities, the Catholic hospital is the only hospital within a 35-mile radius. Education is another area where Christian involvement has been key. Christians run thousands of private schools that usually meet or exceed the quality of the public schools. The Catholic Church or various Protestant denominations or churches run more than 7 in 10 of the private schools in America. Churches also minister to the needy and marginalized in society. There are soup kitchens and outreaches to the poor and homeless. Churches also provide meals for the homebound. They provide marriage counseling as well as psychological counseling. Christian organizations place children in foster care and adoption, and Christian groups run pregnancy resource centers. You know, Christians aren't going on strike, but if they did, America would be a very different place indeed. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
I'm Penna Dexter. Jeremy Dyes is in studio with me, and Jonathan Saenz from Texas Values is on the line, and we're talking about a privacy act that we hope passes in Texas to protect women. And as we mentioned before the break, major corporations and their CEOs are, bringing up these arguments about equal protection for all citizens, and they are basically including transgenders, so they want to change it for everyone else. Is kind of the way I look at it. But Jonathan, talk about first of all, you had a rally yesterday. Certain people did get in to see some of the leadership, but others didn't. But what I love is the pastor's involvement in this.
Yeah, that's right. There were a group of 200 people and a lot of pastors that, speak on behalf of and lead thousands of congregations, thousands of people that are part of congregations of the state. There was a letter put out with close to 1,000 pastors from so many different counties and cities across the state. You can go to our website, txvalues.org, and see the letter and other information on this issue.
Check it out and see if your pastor's on the list.
That's exactly right. I mean, and it was the big name pastors. You've got Ed Young from Houston. You've got Jack Graham. I mean, you got, just a lot of the names you would think of that are on there. But then, but it's also, it was a diverse group. You've got African-American groups like Coalition of African-American Pastors. You've got Hispanic pastors on there. One who had his sermon subpoenaed from Houston, Hernan Castaño, with the mayor of Houston a few years back. And so just a diverse group, San Antonio, Dallas, South Texas, you name it. And so that's more of an accurate representation of what the faith community is in support of. And so the folks that want to kill this legislation and want to allow local laws that open up girls' bathrooms for men and boys to go into it. They had some faith leaders earlier in the week, and no disrespect to, their right to have religious freedom, but they don't represent the majority of people when it comes to this issue across the state from a faith perspective. But this is a common sense issue. You talked about some of the businesses. On our website, txvalues.org, we have a link with a lot of business leaders who've come forward in support of the legislation. But the legislation, it's kind of unusual because legislation does not impact the private business. Is the point you were making, right? The hypocrisy involved. The legislation makes it clear that it respects the right of private businesses to decide what they want to do, and specifically prevents the government from telling them what they can do. But now you've got these private businesses trying to tell the government how to write state policy. And, Governor Abbott's responded to that. This is one of his priority items, this Privacy Act. And so he's responded to that saying, look, we're not going to let, these CEOs and groups like the NFL who have not made a specific position tell us how to run our state business. And so we know how to make the right decisions on these issues. But I will tell you, though, it's about a week and a half left in the special session. We really need more people to speak up on this issue in their community. And so our website has information, and so do other friendly groups. So call your elected official directly and ask them to support this issue and get engaged, and particularly State House Affairs Committee members. And look, if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you got people like Ron Simmons, who is the leader on this issue in the House, who needs support for this. But and that's going to be the key. The more that constituents ask their House member to sign on to legislation like Senate Bill 3 and House Bill 46, it's going to make it clear to the Speaker of the House that he's getting in the way of the will of the people.
Jonathan, if people wanted to know, for instance, how to reach Ron Simmons or how to reach a certain legislator about this, do you have information on your website about that?
We do, yeah. If you go to txvaluesaction.org is where that type of information is, txvaluesaction.org. People can get directly in contact with their legislator by email. There's also a phone number that they can call. And, that is the key to this process. And so we know the majority of the people support this type of common sense action, and they realize it's necessary. But they need to be reminded at the Capitol, because the other side is spending $1 million on ads. We've got some ads that are out there on this issue to inform people, but people are putting money in from a national level, and they're trying to take over and reshape the values of Texans. So we need Texans to stand up.
It's easy to demagogue this because, as you mentioned, and we have to make it clear, Jeremy and Jonathan, that the privacy bill affects government entities. If our taxpayers go to it, then we want privacy. If our tax dollars go toward the schools or the government buildings, we want privacy enforced there. For businesses, it's different. They can do whatever they want. They can have a restrictive bill where you have to use the bathroom according to your biological status, or they can have very liberal bills. They can say, well, anyone can go in and out of the bathrooms. We're going to have one bathroom for everyone in my business. Businesses can do what they want. This is not tell them what they have to do, correct?
That's right. And look, we support limited accommodations, if you will, or private accommodations.
Sure.
And so, that's what they've tried in several school districts to say, look, we'll give you access to a private bathroom where nobody else is in there, the door locks, whatever is necessary. But what we've heard is that's not been good enough. So like in Dripping Springs School District, close to the Austin area, the next year after they had a private accommodation, the little boy, his parents said, we're going to sue you at the school district if you don't let our son go into the girls' bathroom. And so they've just really ratcheted up their intolerance on this issue. And so, but if you think about it from the way this issue plays out, and the reason we're talking about showers and locker rooms, public school and government buildings includes like a city park that has a swimming pool. Okay. And there was an incident that happened like this in Seattle, where you have a government facility like a shower and a swimming pool where you have children going to change and getting undressed completely to change into a swimsuit, to be on a swim team and things of that nature. And so a lot of people don't realize this. In Denton, the city of Denton has a senior citizen center where it was reported last year that a man was in the women's bathroom. And there's an article out about this where the government officials said, we don't really question that. So they're allowing it to happen. And so if you think it's not going to affect your community or it hasn't, you're probably just not aware of it. But on our website, we've got a 2.5-page list of incidents where these privacy violations have happened in Texas. And so, but we've got a chance now to put an end to this, or at least exercise some, discretion and common sense at the state level, so people know across the state, no matter where they go in a government building, that they don't have this risk of their privacy being violated.
Yeah, and Jonathan, I think we hit the economic concerns with this kind of a bill, but it also hits directly at the issue of freedom. I mean, think if you were a business here in the state of Texas and you've got X amount of counties in this state, and you said 1,200 different school districts or whatnot in the state. People have to conduct business across all of those different counties, and if they've got to adjust their business model per county, that can be a real impediment to the freedom to operate a business. So when I go to the gym and I hear on the way there on the radio that Pepsi and a number of other major conglomerates from out of state are coming in and trying to tell the state of Texas how to operate their state, it rings hollow to me, because you got mom and pop businesses that are trying to eke out a living across the DFW Metroplex and elsewhere, where they're going to have to change literally from one county line to the next. Your bill seems to be something that promotes freedom, but I think there's competing interests out there, if I'm not mistaken, that would try to force a different standard upon businesses.
Yeah, I mean, you have some of these businesses that are really, they're being funded by the LGBT lobby groups and others because it is a political issue for them. And they're trying to really force businesses to do things differently, private businesses and the government to adjust themselves when that's not what they're doing themselves. But if you're a small business, it's a little bit more difficult for you to make the changes like you're saying. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we have a lot of small businesses that are supporting this legislation, because it does protect them. It does keep their freedom intact. And here's something else. This issue is not static. It's going to go one way or another. You're going to have state law that says private businesses get to make their own decision, but on government buildings, we have a responsibility to protect privacy for citizens. So you're either going to have that, or you're going to have laws at the local level or at some other level that force the private businesses to do things like they tried to do in Houston, and then will fine you if you don't do it that way, or if you don't, create some new type of bathroom. One of the amendments to this bill that didn't pass, thankfully, was that every building like that was built after September 1st or January 1st of this coming year had to create some new bathroom status and bathroom structure for their buildings. And so you can imagine the impact that's going to start having on people that want to open up small businesses or want to expand. And so that is a legitimate economic concern that's being ignored.
Jonathan, thank you so much for explaining this to us. And I think what it does is it reemphasizes what I said at the beginning. This is a national issue. Texas really needs to end up doing the right thing here. And that's still a little bit up for grabs. But ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you'll get involved if you can, whether you're in Texas or not. And again, Jonathan, thank you so much for what you're doing and for joining us today.
Well, thank you for giving us an opportunity. Again, our website's txvalues.org. As a matter of fact, U.S. Representative Pete Olson has now jumped into this issue. And so, but any support we can get from other parts of the country, it is welcome.
That's Texas Values, and you can also click through at pointofview.net to find their website. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Would you like to be above average or exceptional? I'll explain how you can be in a moment. What do you think about change? Some people love it, others not so much. I'm guessing you agree our culture needs change. But how will that happen? Change happens with you and your influence. If each of us does our part, God can change the culture through us. That's a goal at Point of View, to help you change things around you. We never charge for the information we deliver each day, but that information is not free. There is a significant cost in getting it to you. You know who helps us do that? About 1 out of every 800 listeners to Point of View. So you can be above average. You can be exceptional by visiting pointofview.net and clicking the banner Change Happens with You, or by calling 1-800-347-5151. Thank you for being exceptional by supporting Point of View. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a busy week in the news, and there's certainly good news when you look at our economy. The stock market hit 22 this week, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and the job growth was reported, huge job growth, low unemployment. So, things look good in that sense, but then we've got real challenges when it comes to, I think, just the cultural fabric, the family. And I think when you look at this issue of transgender bathrooms, Jeremy, people just wonder, why are we making such a big deal about such a small segment of the population who are transgenders? But I think it's about so much more than that. I think it's about the left's effort to cause us to question the way God made people, to really get at the heart of Christianity and people's faith. And this isn't a tool that they've used to do it. I mean, we can talk about privacy, and that's a really good way to, I think, protect what we have and to keep people from having to open these bathrooms and locker rooms up. But I think the real issue has to do with religion and people's faith. And you are about protecting religious liberty. And in so many ways, and through really our public schools and our churches and the military and in the public square. And you've got a sort of a tool that you're using now at First Liberty that allows you to help people understand the threats. And I think really when you have a story to tell, that's how you teach lessons the best. I mean, Jesus did that with his parables. And, a lot of people who try to help organizations that are helping the poor will do it by telling stories. Well, in the areas of religious liberty that First Liberty Institute deals in, telling those stories is very helpful. So you begun doing that, and you're doing it through the First Liberty Briefing. We have the great privilege of airing that during weekdays on Point of View. And just kind of tell us about the genesis of it and, how it's going.
Yeah, look, every lawsuit is a story. Every person's name that's on a lawsuit or their business has a story behind it. There are real people behind it that have suffered a real loss, or at least allege that they've suffered a real loss, and it comes to a head in a federal lawsuit. We can read these things as a very esoteric academic exercise of seeing the both sides of the V, as we call it in the law, and learning what the legal principles are, and that's all good. That's important. I spent 3 years of law school having to do that every night, and frankly, I got a little bored with it all. Because they didn't ever emphasize the stories behind the stories. At First Liberty, one of my jobs is to go to the clients, to go find these people, usually really soon after they've had this injury. Toni Richardson, for example, up in Maine, I flew to her house overnight. I talked to her on Tuesday night. I was there by Wednesday night to meet with her and her husband in her kitchen, talking about how she had been disciplined by the school district as an educational technician for telling a colleague in a private conversation in a room by themselves with no one else around. She went to church with this gentleman as well. She was disciplined because she told that gentleman that she was praying for him. And then she was later on told by the school district that violated the Constitution. Well, that is, of course, ridiculous, and you can learn more about that at First Liberty. But, these are real people. Toni Richardson is a real human being and someone that her story is worth hearing, because if it could happen to Toni Richardson in Augusta, Maine, she would be the first one to tell you if it can happen to her, it can happen to anybody else anywhere. And so we've got the blessing to be able to learn from a lot of these stories. Like I said, every case is a story. So what we've done is just taken a bunch of these cases and told the story of them. And we do that on the First Liberty Briefing, which is 3 times a week. You can download it right now at iTunes or Google Play. Put it on your iPhone, your Android device, and make it a part of your routine. And I like to tell people that it's only 90 seconds long, which means your dentist reminds you that you're supposed to brush your teeth for 90 seconds. And I can never remember how long 90 seconds is. Well, look, press play. And when I say go to firstliberty.org, you can stop brushing your teeth because it's all done. It's just 90 seconds. It doesn't take very long to be able to commit to that. And in the process, you're hearing some incredible stories about people who have had either really bad things happen to them or they've taken an important stand and a great precedent has occurred. Either one of those are worth learning about. And what you'll find is these stories time and time again, religious liberty is winning. And people are willing to stand up, from little kids, 6 years old, to old people at 65 and older that are able to stand up for their religious liberty and have important things happen to them, either at the district court level where 500,000 other cases are waiting, or maybe it's at the circuit courts of appeal with 50,000 other cases, or maybe you're that rare case that only about 80 cases fit in every year at the Supreme Court of the United States, where you're having those issues sorted through, and we get a window into what our judges and justices believe the Constitution provides with religious liberty.
So you say we, and I know this is an effort of First Liberty, but you're the one that puts all the work into it. You actually write the story and voice it and air it, and it sounds wonderful. These are not all liberty cases. Of course, you explain your liberty cases, but just they're various violations of religious liberty, correct?
Yeah, look, sometimes I find a news story that's talking about a religious liberty matter, and it's of interest to me, so I talk about that story, tell that story, and give you a little bit of analysis of what the law would be on that if we were to take that case on, or how it supports the idea that we have religious liberty in this country. Other times, it's just, okay, I'll let in a little dirty secret here. It's me learning the law. There's a lot of cases in the catalog of religious liberty law that are out there that are simply fascinating stories of people that have, one gentleman had his had a scholarship removed because he was getting a state grant, and somebody didn't think that he should use that for a religious purpose. He was going to go to seminary with it, and the Supreme Court ultimately agreed with that.
Yeah.
So
Wasn't that up in Washington?
It was, state of Washington, that he shouldn't have that. Well, what is that guy doing today? Do you know? He's an attorney. And so maybe the next time this situation comes back around, maybe he's the guy that actually brings that case up. Who knows? There are all kinds of fun stories about that. I talked not too long ago about a case out of the state of Maine. I keep coming back there, but it's of recent interest to me, where the state legislature there passed an accommodation for the Amish. They think it's too ostentatious to wear blaze orange when they go hunting, yet it's part of their religious practice to make sure that they wear those muted colors. But they do a fair bit of hunting up there in the state of Maine to support themselves. Well, a reasonable accommodation that they worked out with the state legislature was to wear a certain color of red. That was okay by their religious beliefs. It satisfied the Department of Wildlife so they wouldn't have to worry about hunter safety during those times. Hey, that's a beautiful display of how we can have and respect people's religious liberty and yet maintain the laws that are necessary to the operation of good government around here. So you get time and time again these stories. You and I were talking off air about this student out of, I've forgotten where it was, Illinois, I
love
think it was.
that story. I think it was one of your briefings this week,
I think
correct?
so, yeah. He was a salutatorian.
He was graduating, yeah.
Yeah, as a salutatorian of a 6th grade class, which I didn't know they had, but there you are. Little town, as a matter of fact, and, everybody knows everybody. And he had this idea that he would talk about his faith as a part of this salutatorian speech. Well, some busybody got upset about that, complained about it, said you can't do that kind of thing. He was told he can't do that kind of thing on campus to a captive audience at a graduation ceremony. But there's some other good doer in the city there that said, hey, look, the school that they're going to hold the graduation at is directly across the street from my house. Tell you what, if he can't do it on school property during the ceremony, just have him come over to my house and he can stand on my front porch. And so that's what actually happened during the ceremony. Instead of him delivering the speech from the podium that was set up on the school campus, he walked across the street. Everybody turns around and watches this little kid give his speech. And his mom was thrilled to death, as you might imagine she would be and should be. But these are the little things that it takes, that we see at demonstrations of Americans across this country saying, hey, look, not only does common sense prevail, but common sense prevails towards the idea of more liberty, and especially more religious liberty in particular.
Now, one thing you have at First Liberty, not only do you have the attorneys and you have the affiliated volunteer attorneys across the country to help you with these important, groundbreaking cases, you also have kits for average citizens to help people, for instance, in the school, in the graduation prayer, whatever. What are your rights in the schools? What are your rights in your in your workplace? You have those, don't you?
We do, yeah. Go to firstliberty.org and you'll be able to find them very quickly, along with the podcast links if you want to check it out there at firstliberty.org. That's FIRST liberty.org. But yeah, we've got kits for those that are men and women in the armed forces to be able to know what their religious liberty is within the service. We have kits for churches and nonprofit religious ministries to know how do you best run your ministry to make sure that you're in the best position possible to keep that ministry operational. And then one that is, I think, probably our most popular, and especially at this time of year, is for students and teachers. What are your rights when it comes to the school year? I saw that students are already going back to school. This past week, they've already started going back to school in some places. Get that folder. You can order a hardbound copy. That is a real small envelope size kit, or you can just download it and print it out and put it in your Trapper Keeper and keep it there so that you know what your rights are, not just for graduation, but for your school assignments, for your school discussions, your classroom discussions, your clubs, your meetings, that sort of thing. Be prepared.
You can click through to First Liberty Institute from pointofview.net or go to firstlibertyinstitute.org, firstliberty.org. All of those will get you there. We'll be right back.
The sad news of the death of 11-month-old Charlie Gard sparked something in my memory. Charlie Gard is the British baby who died last week after an unsuccessful, months-long battle his parents fought with the British Health Service to take him to the U.S. for treatment. I rifled through some old posters and found what I was looking for. A poster that contains a picture of my husband and me in straitjackets, blindfolded, with our mouths taped shut. This was a mock-up for a promotional piece Concerned Women for America sent out to its members, encouraging them to call their U.S. senators. The copy explains that a treaty about to come before the Senate for ratification would give government officials authority over children, over and above their parents. The copy contains a warning against ratifying the treaty, stating, America must not make the same mistake as Great Britain. The treaty is the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. Then President Bill Clinton signed it, and 195 countries eventually ratified it. But pressure from pro-family and parents' rights groups caused the U.S. Senate to withhold approval, and to this day, to its credit, the Senate has not taken this up. William Estrada, an attorney and director of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, wrote in the Daily Signal that, quote, this convention diminishes the role of parents in the care of their own children and leaves them at the mercy of the state. This is exactly what happened to Charlie Gard. Charlie's parents raised $1.7 million to seek the only treatment that might have helped. But during the months in which Charlie's parents appealed his case, all the way to the European Court of Human Rights, the disease acted on his muscles and organs, weakening them beyond hope. The court's final decision cited Article 3 of the Convention, which places the state in charge of children and only requires it to take the parents' rights into account. Bitter fruit of an evil treaty. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. This is the final segment, but we would love to know if you have any opinions on sort of the shift in staff in the White House. We've kind of been reporting on that over the days, and I think one of the major shifts, Jeremy, that may make a big difference is getting a new chief of staff in the White House. I liked Reince Priebus to some degree. I think he's a believer, and he was really effective in helping get President Trump elected. He was not the one, though, to make things happen in the White House as chief of staff. and he sort of had to share his power with Steve Bannon. But now things have changed, and so much shifting, it's almost kind of funny. I think the beginning of it was when President Trump appointed Scaramucci as communications director. Sean Spicer wasn't going to work under him and left. And so, we had him there for 11 days. He messed up by just basically giving an interview to the New York Times that was filled with profanity and insults. And so he was gone. And the president, and then Reince Priebus was gone partly because of Scaramucci, I think, but probably was going anyway. So we have General Kelly, who'd been head of Department of Homeland Security, moving into this position. It seems like some adult and grown-up things have been happening since he's been there very quickly. And so, and one of those things really, there are many things I think that we could list, but I think that this was a question that Karl Rove asked in the Wall Street Journal. Does a strong chief of staff reflect a strong president? Is this perhaps going to help the perception that President Trump has control over his White House? I don't think people have thought he did, and he, in a sense, probably hasn't. So do you think that Kelly will be able to speak to him in ways that calm him down, help him to tweet more responsibly, things like that?
It's a fool's errand to guess how someone can actually control Donald Trump, because there's been a history there that no one is able to become the Trump whisperer, so to speak, here. But I do want to point out that there are, to put the Scaramucci life cycle in perspective here, there are fruit flies that were born the same day that he was coming into that position that are still alive today.
Wow.
So if you think about that, it's been a pretty short life in terms of his career in public office, and I think probably rightly so. One big lesson that everybody can take away from that. Two, the second one I'd point to my boys, and that would be foul language never gets you anywhere. But the more important lesson perhaps for public servants is that never forget that there's a microphone somewhere, and it will come back to bite you at some point. But, will General Kelly, now Chief of Staff Kelly, will he be able to provide some guidance? Look, I think in terms of organizational structure, it was very, very important for somebody to have the final say, right? Truman was famous for saying the buck stops with him, and truly it still does with the president. But in terms of the actual organizational efforts of the presidency, which includes their legislative efforts as well, in addition to the countless things that the White House has to account for, from statesmanship to legislative efforts to regulatory affairs and everything else. For one person to be that pinch point is going to be very, very helpful. It was weird to me, an odd experience, to have two people share as co-chiefs of staff with Steve Bannon and Reince Priebus. I think that was a setup for some disaster. And if reports are to be believed, or Reince's own words are to be believed anyway, without his ability to really hire, fire, and have a couple of those other different things, it was very difficult for him to accomplish his entire task. We'll know pretty quickly, I think, how effective Kelly will be in that position relative to leaks. Is he going to be able to make examples out of those who do so, and therefore keep others from having problems or before they begin? Will he be able to slow down the president? That's a $1 million question. But the role of chief of staff is a very vital role in the White House and in the administration. The president simply has too many things going on to be able to stay on top of every single detailed minutia within the actual administrative running of the office. The chief provides that layer of go-between so that the very important things get to the president, and some of the things that can be handled at a lower level are rerouted over there. At the same time, don't forget that the chief acts as that gatekeeper and allows things that he believes, or that the senior policy staff believes, need to get to the desk of the president, including legislative efforts or regulatory reforms, things having to do with the executive order on religious liberty, as a matter of fact, as we talked about earlier. What things are brought up within cabinet meetings. The chief is helping to set those agendas and helping to run those meetings. So it's very important to have someone in there that understands the nuance and balance on all those issues and can make a compelling case for what those issues ought to be of top priority for the administration. And I hope personally that one of those things that he is sympathetic to immediately is that of religious liberty. And specifically, I would add to that, the religious liberty of our members of the armed services. He himself being a U.S. Marine Corps general. Yeah, I think he has an intuitive sense that there's something that needs to be done there. He can marry that with the executive order that the president recently signed, and hopefully we can see some action by the executive office of the presidency pretty quick.
Yeah, his resume bodes well, I think, because he is a general. So some people said, well, why do we have so many generals? Are we militarizing the administration? But he, when Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House, he was a Marine liaison officer to the House. And he would travel around with Newt Gingrich. And he was also, then he was assistant to the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe. And then he was also senior military assistant to 2 defense secretaries. So he actually has a lot of, and that was Robert Gates and Leon Panetta, but he actually has a lot of government experience. So in a sense, I think that some of those things that you just listed, he may be fairly effective at. And, I think part of this was Reince Priebus was expected to be able to work very well with Congress because he was the chairman of the RNC. He's from Wisconsin, good friends with Paul Ryan, the speaker. But it didn't work out that way, partly because of being placed on an equal plane with Steve Bannon, the strategic director. I think they created that title. And partly just because I just think that President Trump was trying to use establishment figures in his White House to show that he was a team player with the Republican establishment, but he really didn't listen to them too much. So we're going to see what happens here.
Yeah.
I think there is a trust level. He seemed to be very happy with the way General Kelly ran the Department of Homeland Security. I don't know who's going to go into that position, but it just feels like it was a really good move and really greatly needed at this point in the administration.
Yeah, look, I think to the general question of whether or not generals are there too many of them, no, I don't think so. Excuse me. But I do think that the generals have a great experience in leadership. And we've seen that time and time again. We had a general I actually had a couple generals as presidents of the United States. They oversee huge amounts of people and have to engage in executive tasks all the time and making split-second decisions on consequential, sometimes life or death situations on a daily basis. And so I think those baptisms by fire provide really good leaders, not across the board. There are exceptions clearly to that rule, but as a general rule, I think it is helpful to have people who have had that executive experience. And in this particular case, where Donald Trump comes out of a different economic background, a business background, to have someone in leadership outside of that sphere, I think is very helpful to the administration as a whole.
Yeah, I think the strategic type of mind that a general has to have can also apply to government. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening today, and I hope you have a great weekend. I want to really say thank you. We've got a new producer here at Point of View. And Stephen, thank you so much for your work today. Also, Shamila and also Elisa and Andrew. Appreciate all your good work. And ladies and gentlemen, we hope and pray that you will have a great weekend. And also, just check out our website, pointofview.net. The donate button and all the good information is there for you. We'll see you next week.
Would you like to be above average or exceptional? I'll explain how you can be in a moment. What do you think about change? Some people love it, others not so much. I'm guessing you agree our culture needs change. But how will that happen? Change happens with you and your influence. If each of us does our part, God can change the culture through us. That's a goal at Point of View, to help you change things around you. We never charge for the information we deliver each day, but that information is not free. There is a significant cost in getting it to you. You know who helps us do that? About 1 out of every 800 listeners to Point of View. So you can be above average. You can be exceptional by visiting pointofview.net and clicking the banner Change Happens with You, or by calling 1-800-347-5151. Thank you for being exceptional by supporting Point of View. Pointofview.net and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.